What's up, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, and the overall markets. I'm going to talk about why the market is selling off during the after hours as we just got some big tech earnings, not to mention more data coming out for tomorrow. But just know that I am not a financial planner, so make sure you take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. Deposit $2,000 and you're guaranteed 30. And the offer ends very soon at the end of March. So, as far as the market's going, we had a very interesting day. The market started off with this sell off because of the fact that China has announced that they're going to retaliate with tariffs against the US. So, we had a lot of news involving these tariffs, right? It started off with Donald Trump imposing tariffs on Mexico, China, and Canada, but the Mexican and Canadian ones have been delayed. The news came out yesterday, which helps the market bounce very, very nicely. So, that happened. And then what happened overnight was China announced more retaliatory tariffs against the US. They're imposing 15% tariffs on US oil and liquefied natural gas exports and a 10% charge on American oil and agricultural equipment. There's also more that could be coming, so just keep that in mind as this may affect EVs, many electric trucks, and factors just like that. So this did cause a small little pullback, but the market was very resilient. We saw SPY retest 596, then make a nice move to the upside back up to about 602. It wasn't really enough to cause the market to sell off too hard, and overall the market remained very resilient. But then as time went on, okay, despite the fact that we saw a nice green day, despite the fact that Nvda, Apple, Google, and all these tech stocks started to bounce, we even saw Tesla in the green very nicely for a nice green for our ETFs and index funds. Despite all of that, the market is now selling off again. So it's a very volatile market. The market's going back and forth. I like to describe this as a kangaroo market, jumping back and forth between supply and demand. And in this case, I do anticipate there might be a small pullback coming because of big tech earnings, but it might not be something that lasts forever. It might not be sustainable. It might just be a temporary pullback before buyers defend again. So I'll talk more about the charts in just a couple of minutes. Let's talk about why the market might see a bit of a pullback tomorrow morning and what could happen after that. Well, you have to remember that starting right here, I went over PayPal's earnings in the morning. They did relatively well. But then today we just got AMD, Alphabet, and Snap announcing their earnings. Okay. Starting off with Alphabet/Google. Okay. The share price is down quite a bit because they ended up missing on earnings. Starting off with their EPS and revenue, you guys could see that their EPS for Q4 was at $2.15. That was above expectations, not too bad. But then their revenue was at about $96.47 billion. That is short of the $96.54 billion target that these investors had. So they actually missed on revenue, which is very rare for a company like Google. So not the best of news for them, not so good for Alphabet. On top of this, there was also some more mixed results when it comes to the cloud performance. That's been having like a consistent amount of mixed performances. I just want to say that YouTube advertising was at about $10.47 billion above expectations, but their cloud revenue was at 11.96 billion. That is missing the expectation of about 12.19 billion. So they came short on cloud revenue, not the best of news for them. And then we also saw a slight increase in their overall traffic acquisition costs. This was not that far from expectations, but still a little bit of an increase. There were some concerns about the fact that they're going to be investing billions into AI and the fact that they missed on revenue. Obviously, there's going to be a big explosion in the reactions because of the fact that there's very high expectations for tech. So as a result, despite the fact that we pushed so much during the open hours today, as soon as this news came out that they missed on revenue, we ended up seeing a bit of a pullback. Overall, their outlook still remains strong, and they're going to be making very, very big investments into AI. This led to some concerns amongst investors as well, as they're not as like optimistic as before about this, especially because of what happened with their revenue. But hopefully things do improve as time goes on for the company. I'm not really too scared or anything like that. This is just a short-term move. But for now, expect some selling and a gap down on Alphabet/Google for tomorrow. Now, how about AMD? AMD actually their earnings were not too bad, but compared to before, they could have been better. So what happened was their overall revenue for AMD was up 24% year over year to a record $7.66 billion. However, here's the thing you have to remember when it comes to, and that's for the year over year, when it comes to their earnings came in at about 482 million or 29 cents per share. That's for Q4. That is technically down $667 million from a year earlier. So before, their earnings were a lot stronger. And then this year, if you look at how things were looking for this for Q4, the numbers are actually weaker compared to the previous year. And that's what made investors not so happy. On the adjusted basis, sure, they beat, but if you don't adjust it, they actually technically ended up seeing a decline in earnings, which is why the share price went down. And then there was also a lot of talk about how, yes, their guidance was pretty good with their revenue and EPS. They had good expectations coming up. And they also praised DeepSeek, saying that it makes them very, very excited for them to continue to spend a lot on AI. They want to ramp up on that. But because their earnings were not really enough to wow investors, the share price came down. There was also some concerns about their data center trajectories I heard investors talk about. Besides that, it wasn't really enough to wow investors. That's why the share price is down. On the other hand, Snap did relatively well. They had a surprise profit. They ended up beating on EPS and revenue. They ended up seeing a beat with them earning 1 cent per share. That's actually above what we were expecting, which is a loss of 4 cents per share. And then we also saw some good growth in revenue. So we saw about their sales at about $1.56 billion for Q4 above expectations. Guidance was pretty decent overall, pretty much just matching expectations. That's why we're seeing the share price up. So good job by Snap. That was the only one that was in the green. AMD and Google are both in the red. That's why it makes things a little bit more complicated for tomorrow. So tomorrow, what I think is going to happen is the market's going to see a small sell-off, but it might not last forever because it's going to depend on some data. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., we actually have very, very serious data. We have the ISM services PMI, employment, new orders, and prices. The ISM services gives us a lot of insights about how the services sector is doing in America. And that's very important to understand. If the data is looking like it's declining, are we getting closer to like some recessionary signals? How on earth are these different business activities looking as well? It'll give us a lot of insights. So get ready for some high volatility tomorrow at 10 a.m. And then last but not least, the fear and greed index is currently at fear right now. There's still some fear in the markets as we're seeing the market getting bought back up. Momentum is at fear. And then we also have the put to call option ratio still elevated. That is what led to a bit of a squeeze. So what is my view of the markets? What do I think is going to happen? It's very simple, actually. Okay. I want to say the market's very resilient. It's a very resilient market despite all these hardships. It's holding up. If we hold above 602, you're looking for 605 as your target. If we can't hold above 598, we're looking for a move back down to 595 towards our 200 EMA on SPY. And if that fails us, we're looking for these lows at 590 to hold. Otherwise, we dip all the way down to 584 to fill the gap. So I hope that's as clear as possible. If we lose 595 and 590, we're bearish. We're looking for a dip to the 580s. And if we break 602 and 605, we're more bullish. So those are going to be your main levels to watch for. But what do I think is going to happen? Well, the market's very resilient. Even though we had like all this tariff fear and et cetera that was building up, the market's continuing to get bought back up. I believe there's going to be a temporary move down towards 598 or below on SPY. We could be dipping to 598, if not 595, but then there's a good chance that we're not going to go all the way down unless we get another major catalyst. There's a good chance we try to bounce right back up towards 602 like this to make a nice recovery move. Might just be a temporary dip. And the reason I say this is because every time SPY has dipped since like Monday, we dipped and pumped. Tuesday, we dipped and pumped. Every time we dip, we just get bought back up eventually. So there might be a small pullback to 598 to about 595 in that range before we see some buyers try to defend us and push us right back up. That's what I'm leaning towards. But don't forget, break 602, we're more bullish. And if we lose 595, we could turn more bearish. I don't lean super bullish or bearish. I think that we're just in the middle, and we might see a small decline because of these big tech earnings causing a bit of a pullback before some buyers try to defend again. That's what I'm leaning towards. So keep that in mind, guys. That's my prediction. For the QQQ, if we're bullish, you want to see us break 525 to push to 528 and eventually the 530s. If we're bearish, you want to see us lose 521, watch 518 and 516. If those fails, we're going to be dumping back down. It's very simple. Get back above the 530 area and we're going to be very, very bullish. Get below 516, we turn more bearish. I think that there's going to be a test of 521. We might dip a little bit below that depending on the reaction after Google. So it might dip a little bit lower towards like 518 or so for a small pullback before it tries to bounce again and make a move back up to about 525 for a V-shaped recovery. The market's very volatile, and that's what I'm leaning towards as long as we don't lose 516. So watch your levels just to be safe, but look for a potential move to the downside first. Look for a little pullback tomorrow, possibly to 520 to 518. Maybe even all the way down to the 200 EMA before we see some buyers defend us. That's the most likely possibility in my eyes. I think the Russell is looking more resilient. It's not as affected by tech. Might retest some of these EMAs as long as you don't lose 226. It might just be like a small dip before it tries to continue to consolidate and slowly push up like this. If 226 fails, we're looking for a dip back down to 224. I see a small dip here, consolidation, and maybe a rebound for 228 as the most likely possibilities. So just keep that in mind. For ES, we're looking decent overall, especially because we're technically in a range like this. So what I anticipate is that there's a tough resistance at our 50 EMA. We were not able to hold above this so far. We need to get back above 60-60 around that area to get up to 60-80 and eventually 60-100. If we lose 6,000 flat, we turn more bearish. We're looking for us to retest this trend line down here in the 59.50s or below. So those are like the bullish and bearish levels. But here's what I'm basically anticipating. There might be a small pullback right where this imbalance is right here towards either 6,025, if not 6,000 flat in this range down here. But then we could attempt to bounce after that if we do get a break. So it might be just a temporary move down before some buyers try to defend. On NQ, we have the same thing essentially going on. So if we break 21,700, we're looking for a push for 21,800. If we end up losing 21,500, we're looking for a dump back down to about 21,380. So I anticipate what's going to happen is we might be dipping to 21,500 or a little bit below that with some balances over here. We'll see if we get a bounce again or not. If we end up losing this low right here at 21,400, then I could be looking for like a bigger decline. So we're going to be looking for a move like this. Either we dip a little bit more and we bounce or not, depending on the news. But hopefully we do see buyers defend us as we dip a little bit. So look for a small dip tomorrow morning. We'll see what kind of reaction we get. Bitcoin, it's been a little bit lackluster today. You want to see it get back above 101,000 to turn bullish. If we can't do that, there's going to be a risk of us returning back down to like 96,000 or so before some buyers defend it. I think that Bitcoin may slowly inch its way down towards 96,000, and we'll see if we get a bounce or not, so just keep that in mind. For AMD, not looking that great. We wanted to see this close above 120 to turn bullish. We haven't done that, but simultaneously, we're holding 115 very nicely. So I think that we're just going to shuffle in these areas, especially because tech is going to sell off a bit. Might just do a little shuffle dance here. If we could base at 115, then yes, there could be a nice rebound back into the 120s. If 115 fails us, we could be dipping all the way down towards 110. It depends if we hold support or not. My anticipation is that we dip and consolidate a bit before we see an attempt to bounce later. So there might be a small dip on Nvda back down towards like 116 or so before we see some consolidation. Tesla's trying to base. What I like about Tesla is that we're technically trying to hold 386 or 200 EMA. We also have a gap to fill down here. I anticipate there might be a little bit of downside tomorrow morning, back down towards 386, if not where this trend line of support is at 382. So the low 380s may come, and then we might just try to bounce like this. And then if we hold 386, as long as we hold that, there could be a bounce right here back up towards where this gap happens to be, to fill this gap up here. There might be a move just like that before it makes a move, down again. The reason I draw it out like this is because of this trend on Tesla. So if you zoom out of Tesla, we had a rejection. We're technically on a downtrend. So it might just follow history again if we do get some kind of pop. We'll see if we even get the pop. But for now, look for a small dip on Tesla. We're just going to focus on the first move, a little bit of a dip towards 386 and some consolidation. Then there might be a bounce after. I know Tesla loves to do that before it starts to see significant moves down. So watch that very, very closely. For Apple, we're at resistance at 233, might pull back just a little bit, but I'm hoping that's not going to be too major. It might just be like a temporary move down. So if you take your like key fib levels like this could kind of like retest our 0.786 for like the 227 area for a small little dip before it tries to bounce. So I'm looking for a move like this. We need to see if we could hold 226. If we dip like this, as long as we hold 226, then we could try to bounce and eventually push for like 235. If we lose 226, we're looking for a dip back down to 222. So look for a small pullback, most likely towards 228 or so, near our key fib retracement area. Then we'll see if we get a bounce. As long as we don't lose 226, we should bounce. If we do lose that, I'll be a little bit concerned. All right, guys, that is it for the main tickers I typically talk about on this channel. I'm going to go for a speed run for the rest of these. So Netflix still looks bullish, very resilient. We were breaking down yesterday how I was expecting it to hold support. This is looking quite good. It's been bullish for quite a while. Might consolidate a bit before it starts to push for 1,000. We'll see if 1,000 breaks. Now, it's going to be a very tough psychological area. If we lose this trend line, we're going to be dipping back down to 956, by the way. But as of right now, we're holding the trend line, so it technically favors 1,000 for now. For MicroStrategy, we are looking decent. We got this big dip. before it got bought back up, hitting resistance. Now it's kind of shuffling right over here between these EMAs. So we have resistance at 347. We have support at 342 and also at 340 flat. I anticipate it's going to be dipping closer to like 340, maybe a little bit below that. Jump and just kind of consolidate a bit, and we'll see if we get a rebound or not. But I see a lot of consolidation right here in the low 340s. That's all it's doing for now. Unfortunately, Celsius got a big sell-off. It's on a bit of a downtrend right now. We have to see if it could hold support right over here. I think that, excuse me, I think that there's been a lot of negative news for the share price. So I'm going to be looking at these levels from way back here. If you go back to like 2023 levels, we have the very, very key support right here around this 18.8 area and also at 20 flat. So we need to see if we could hold above these key levels or not. Otherwise, there's going to be a risk of us dipping even lower. So watch and see if we could reclaim 24.6 to turn back up. If we can't do that, this is going to be a risk of slowly trending towards 22 flats, and eventually 20. So just be careful, guys. There's that risk of some downside. Supermicro is looking decent, it's trying to hold support. If we break past 29.9, we're looking for an attempt to push even higher back up towards 31. If we end up losing support right here at 28, we're looking for a dip back down towards 26.8. Look for 29.9 as our resistance. If we break this, we could be looking for a bounce here. So watch and see if that ends up being the case or not, and give this the time it needs. For Palantir broke out very nicely after strong earnings and good growth, especially as they're making deeper connections with the U.S. Defense budget. So that's actually some good news right now. This is looking decent right now. As long as we don't lose 100, it may continue to hold up. So keep that in mind. Might retest 100, and we'll see if it bounces off that or not, but it's still looking very strong. Rivian is going to be retesting the 13 flat area. We're trying to break out of this wedge. We'll see if we hold or not. We have support at 12.6. If we lose that, we turn bearish. If we break resistance at 13, we're going to be bullish. We're kind of stuck in the middle, so give it some time to develop. But I do think there's going to be a bounce for 13 flat on Rivian. For SoFi, we're a little bit more bearish. We're looking to see if we could hold 15, excuse me, if 15 fails us. We're looking for a move back down to about 14.8. We got to get back above 16 to bounce. Otherwise, this favors downside a bit more. AMD is at 109. We'll have to see if we can reclaim 110 or not. Not going to be looking too good. It might sell off a little bit more closer to like 105. So I'm a little bit concerned about this. Looks very weak right now. We also broke the lows from the last couple of months. We never saw the share price this low, guys, in months. So it's looking very weak. Might be tipping towards 105. ARM, it's looking bullish, forming a nice cup and handle like structure. Could dip to retest 160 before it tries to bounce up for the 168 area. So it's still looking bullish. Coin is looking a little bit weaker. Might be retesting 277.5. If that fails us, I'm looking for 277 or 272 before it tries to bounce again. Amazon might be retesting 237, if not 235, before it tries to bounce. It's very resilient, so there might be a small little dip here towards like the 235s before buyers defend it. It has earnings soon, so it shouldn't dump too much. Meta has to hold above 700. As long as we're above that, we're favoring 710. If we lose 700, we're looking for a dip to about 689 before it tries to bounce again. Might be a small little pullback, possibly. Microsoft is looking a little bit lackluster. We were supposed to hold above 412. We're struggling to do that, so it could be retesting these lows right here around the 408 area if that does not hold, so just be very careful. So keep that in mind, guys. We could be seeing a small little pullback right over there. And then Google, it dumped quite a bit. We're looking for support over here around this 191 area. If it loses that, it could dip even more. If it holds that, we could be bouncing for 195. So we'll see. So give this the time it needs. For GameStop, we're rejecting here. We need to see if we get back above 26. Otherwise, we favor 25.35. AMC is trying to hold above 3.17. If that holds, we're looking for an attempt for 3.25. So it looks a bit more bullish. DJT is just consolidating at 30. Might be trying to push to fill this gap for 31 very soon. The VIX dipped quite a bit, but it's going to try to rebound off this support at 16.78. Might see a small bounce before it maybe rejects again. But this temporary bounce could be because of the market maybe selling off just a little bit. The 10-year is very flat, though. Still looks bearish after FOMC. And so is the dollar. We'll see if we hold support or not, but for now, it's not really affecting the markets. So tomorrow morning, there might be a small pullback in the markets. I'm not saying it's going to be major, just a small one. And then I think the market will get bought back up somewhere. Again, we'll be watching to see if we could hold 598 on SPY or not. Why is the market selling off? Because big tech earnings were all red. So that may cause a slight move to the downside just temporarily. All right. So with that being said, I thank you all so much for listening. Just so you guys know, when it comes to the news involving tariffs, OPEC has not reacted so far to this. So I'll keep you guys updated if there's more news involving the tariffs. Until then, I'll see you guys tomorrow before market open. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you guys very soon. Thank you for listening, and peace out.